What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, and if you are trying to rank up in Valorant, but it's just not working, you're not getting to where you want to be in Valorant, then I have the perfect video for you in the top 10 simple things that you aren't doing in Valorant that will instantly help you climb. Now these tips might not be flashy, but they're guaranteed to get you more value in your games, and if you use enough of them, you will start improving and you will climb. Now before we get started, have you ever had an insta-locking Jet Arena that just runs it down mid and dies over and over again in bottom frags? If this has happened to you, smash that like and subscribe button and comment down below the absolute worst play that you ever seen someone do in your games. I'm excited to see the responses, but let's just jump right into it. Now the first thing that you're not doing in your games, but a lot of pros are doing, and it's a very powerful strategy, and it's shoulder jiggle peeking spike diffusers. You see, when someone is trying to defuse a spike, most of the time they're actually just baiting. They're just tapping the spike and then they're waiting for you to swing so that they can make a play on you. The reason this is, if they are full committing to a spike defuse and they're on the defuse when you swing them, then they have to stop defusing, take out their gun, and it just takes so long that they're probably gonna die. This is why it's a real big liability to actually just commit to an actual defuse. So oftentimes you can completely scare people off the spike just by jiggle peeking them. You don't have to have a gun out. You don't have to have anything out. You could even just have your knife out, shoulder jiggle peek them incredibly quickly, and 9 times out of 10, it will scare them off the spike. Now that being said, however, this works even better when enemies kind of roughly know where you are. This lets you gather information really quickly about whether or not they're trying to stick it, and it can be an extremely effective way to burn down that clock and put pressure on enemies so that you don't just hear a defuse sound, swing out, only for the enemy to be ready for you and they just headshot you and shut you down. Now the second thing that you are not doing enough, and it's pretty simple, but it's wall bang more. Especially when enemies know your location already, you're not being stealthy, you're not sneaking around. The enemy know the rough positioning of where you and your team are. There's no downside in just wall banging so many different spots. Let's say you're taking hookah, for example. You could wall bang the wooden box. You could wall bang the wooden ledge if anyone's underneath it. You could wall bang different spots along the middle side with all the metal wall bangable walls. There is so many different places where if you're in a roughly safe positioning where you can back up or go behind natural cover, then it's gonna cost you very little to check one corner, check another. So you don't have to use utility around every single little corner. Instead, you could just wall bang, but make sure that you wall bang head level for one, and for two, try to do control burst as if you were actually shooting at someone. Don't let your spray go everywhere just because you're not seeing who you're spraying at. Imagine that someone is actually behind that wall and you're trying to hone in on a headshot. Now the next big tip I got for you, this is actually a habit that you might be doing overly much, and this is insta crouching. A lot of players get in the habit of crouching after a certain amount of spray, but players get lazy where they'll turn a corner and from medium to farther ranges, they will just start crouching immediately before they start spraying. This actually can become a crutch and make it easier, especially for bad players, to be headshotting you over and over again because you're just turning the corner and crouching instead of using crouch as a method to control your spray. In fact, with proper recoil control, you really don't need a crouch at all except for the longer ranges away when you're in long spray battles. But the biggest problem, especially for people that come from CSGO, is just instinctively crouching overly much. Now, a scenario that I'll give you where crouching can actually be good is when you're going to be taking a duel with someone from very close. This can be really powerful because enemies often have their crosshair head level, but if you're right up to them, your head hitbox is substantially lower, and if you already accommodate by looking upward, you can have the perfect crosshair placement on them while at the same time messing up their crosshair placement on you. Now, the next simple thing that you're not doing is you're not whipping out your classic enough to finish off kills. Yes, your classic pistol. Pros will almost always whip out their classic pistol rather than reloading their weapon when they're in the middle of a gunfight or there's a possibility for an enemy to chase them. The alternate fire on the classic pistol is surprisingly lethal, and if enemies are pretty low, you can finish them off fairly simply. On top of that, you can jump and use your alternate fire. You can chase down kills. A lot of times you'll be opping or you'll be challenging someone, and it's much better to whip out your classic pistol and get guaranteed damage on the table rather than try to reload your gun and give the enemy an opportunity to make a play on you. This also means putting extra practice in specifically the classic pistol, which goes directly into our next tip: put extra practice in the pistol round. You see, pistol round is the most important round in the entire game. In a lot of pro matches, you watch them where one team will lose pistol round and it will snowball exponentially down the line. Pistol round can be worth many more rounds than just a singular round, and that's why it's so important. This is why putting mechanical practice into the classic and the ghost, depending on what your role is and what you predominantly use, that is some of the most important types of practice that you can do. People love to practice the ARs, the bulldogs, the ops, but bang for your buck, practice time to convergence, warming up on pistols, putting in a little time and extra effort on pistols like classic pistol, ghost, even sheriffs. These type of weapons can greatly improve your win rate because having more kills on pistol round on average, let's say you up your kill percentage from something like 0.9 kills per round on average to like 2+, you will all of a sudden be carrying so many games just off the back of pistol round and winning that first round, winning that second round for free, storing up that economy. It is so important, and this is the #1 thing that you should be practicing if you want to improve, because it's going to directly translate to your win rate and your rank altogether. Now, the 6th thing that you need to be doing, and it's really simple, but a lot of people aren't doing it, and it's tracking important abilities and cooldowns. Now, everyone always talks about tracking the ultimates. We've talked about that on this channel, and that's great. You get that information pre-round, and that's great to do, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. But tracking cooldowns and abilities is perhaps even more important, but it takes a great deal of difficulty. Tracking really important cooldowns like Tailwind, Ice Wall, Slow Orbs, these type of cooldowns are very, very important because they can fundamentally change how you play a matchup. Let me give you this example. Imagine you attacked Seaside and you planted for long on Haven. And you have an AWP, but you could switch to an AR if you wanted to. Now you go long so that you have line of sight of the spike, and it's a 1v1 versus you and the Sage, but you have perfect line of sight to the spike, so you're playing really far away. She's not going to be able to basically challenge you because you're holding the angle, and it's a lose-lose scenario for her. Now, all of a sudden, she runs up, walls you off with her Sage wall, and defuses the spike before you could break it. What's the problem here? Well, if you would have actually anticipated the Sage wall, this type of play wouldn't have happened because you wouldn't have been playing long. You would have been playing close, or you would have been playing close choke with an AR instead of an AWP. The information about whether or not she had Sage wall, or just thinking about the possibility of her using Sage wall, this could dramatically change the entire play made before this point. It's very important to track cooldowns like that because this is true across the board. From Nanoswarm to Molly, you got to think about how much time you have left to defuse, what enemies are still alive, what cooldowns do they not have, and if an enemy has not used a cooldown, ask your team, and if they don't know, assume that they still have it, because that is the only way for you to actually play around these things. It is very important that you do this, and if you can start doing this more and more, you're going to be able to set up more favorable engagements and not be caught out by a sneaky ability that you didn't know the enemy had or you weren't even thinking about. Now, moving on to tip number 7, this is a pretty simple one, and this is just anchor more, okay? So a common thing that happens is multiple enemies will touch side or be near side or be playing a default, and the entire team will rotate. We've talked about over-rotating before, but this is not what this is. This is what you should be doing, and this is anchoring. Anchoring is just where you just stay behind, you hold the most powerful choke in any given situation, and you just wait for enemies to rotate, guarding their most likely rotation area. This could be like you're opping, and instead of rotating all the way on bind from A to B, you instead just hold A main, waiting just in case enemies rotate. Now sure, if enemies don't rotate, you're not going to be there in the fight instantly, but the plus side is if enemies ever choose to rotate, you're ready, holding the angle, ready to get a free kill. So you're protecting a whole style of rotation from the enemy and potentially winning that fight if they do rotate. And even if they don't rotate, you're really not losing that much, only slight time. Your allies are still in at the very worst of 4v5, and you'll still be there for the retake later on. Now, as things ramp up, more and more people pile onto site or the spike gets planted, of course you could rotate. But before that, leaving an anchor at the very least to gather information is one of the best things that you could be doing in order to actually win more rounds, especially as enemy teams start to rotate over and over again. It is almost unheard of for an entire pro team on defense to rotate before the spike is down. At the very least, some will rotate, but almost one person always is left at the other plant zone just for simply gathering information at the very least. Now moving on to the next tip that we have for you, and it plays right into the anchor more, and it's just controlling an area is value. A lot of players think that they have to go make a play. They're controlling mid, they're controlling hookah, they're controlling showers, or whatever scenario. I'm not doing anything on defense. Let's go make a play. And yes, there are times that you can make a flank play, but there is value in knowing what enemies are rotating through mid. There is value that knowing that no enemies are in your heaven, or no enemies are in your heaven, or your allies' heaven. There's value knowing that no one snuck through, and that's what controlling space is. You have constant flow of information. Think about how valuable a Cypher Cam is, right? Well, turns out every single one of you is like a Cypher Cam in the fact that you could relay information to each other. So the fact that you were just there is sometimes good enough, especially when it's on the enemy to make a proactive play or do something first. Like, they have to act first because they have to plant the spike. Now imagine the other scenario where you push forward and die. All of a sudden, enemies could push up to heaven. You have to send more people from your team to either rotate there, but then they have to give up their valuable positions. It's almost like an information lockdown when your entire team is there. But as more and more of you die, you have to give up little patches of information all over the map. And if this is because you just gave up your positioning, pushed too aggressively, that is a way that you could actually throw a game and let the enemy sneak in undetected. Now moving on to tip number 9, this is stop being a flex god. Now I know you're gonna say, what the heck, what's wrong with being a flex god? Well, hear me out. The problem with being a flex god is it is impossible to be good at every character. Yes, you can perform better than the people in your game on every character, sure, but that probably has to do with your mechanical skill, not necessarily your ability mastery. There is always more things to learn, more rollouts to learn, more ability mastery and nuance on every single character. And while I do think that players could definitely learn 2, 3, 4 characters, trying to learn the entire roster of characters and playing them consistently is only going to hold you back. Don't just flex to whatever your team needs all the time, especially if that makes it so throughout an entire day of playing like 10 games, you only play the same hero like once or twice. What eventually happens here is you don't form an identity. You fill the role, yes, but there will be some games where anyone could fill that role, or there will be other players that could have filled that role, but you need to be the difference maker, not just the role filler. Now, if instead you played your best character and you did things above and beyond what the other enemy character did on that hero, that is a way that you can make a definitive difference. And what I'm not saying is, I'm not saying one trick, I'm not saying do anything like that. You should definitely have a few characters that you could flex to across different roles so that you could fill patches on a team. What I am saying is try not to spread your hero pool out too thin to where you're just a jack of all trades, master of none. You should be aiming to be masters of a select number of characters so that you really bring the most raw impact into each and every game you play on those characters, learning the ins and outs, tactics, and nuance of that character. Now moving on to tip number 10, this is a mechanical tip. Mechanics always come first in Valorant, and you should aim to never miss easy shots. Now what do I mean by easy shots? This is shots like if someone peeks you and you're holding an angle with an op. Or this is shots like consistently hitting shotgun shots on an enemy. This could even be shots like hitting someone who is not directly looking at you, but you seemingly whiff due to pressure. These type of shots are not really you versus an enemy. These shots are more you versus yourself. It's a lot of static aiming. That's what I'm talking about. Shots that you could technically practice directly in a training room, Kovac, practice range, or whatever. And you should be able to hit these shots in game as well. Now, a lot of other factors could come into play here. Maybe poor movement. Maybe you play poorly under pressure. Or maybe you're having a problem just missing those easy shots where someone peeks you and you have an op. These type of shots are not flashy 180 flicks like Shroud or Hiko or anything like that. These are the shots that you can learn how to do with a decent amount of practice time and consistent practice every day. Do not let yourself ever miss these easy shots in game, because if you can be consistent at the very least with the easy shots, then you will 100% be able to climb. Now do me a big solid and smash the like and subscribe button if you learned anything in this video. Definitely let me know in the comments down below what videos you want to see in the future, but that's all we got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.